Hello and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Simmons with Parenting Accurately, and I am so excited about this broadcast. This is episode 15. I can't believe that we just got started and we're already at episode 15. And on today's broadcast, I'm excited to be able to welcome back a guest that we had early on in the broadcast series when we first started last month, Cindy Hatcher. She is here today with us, and I want to jump right into this today. This is going to be a great conversation about parenting accurately in the age of anxiety and depression. So, welcome, Cindy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for taking your time out of the day. Over here on the West Coast, it's 12 o'clock, so some people might be joining us on our lunch break. And we just want to welcome everybody that's joining us live, or if you're watching the replay. Thank you for tuning in. And I'm sure that today is going to be a day where parents will, if they will stay tuned and listen to the full broadcast, they will end this video with some key tools that will help them in their parenting efforts. Anxiety and depression. We were talking just before the show started about like this day and the age that we live in. And lately, just like to frame this conversation, I've been thinking a lot about like genealogies. Been thinking about like, my ancestry, and that has kind of led me to discover and just be reminded a little bit about how different life is now than it was, let's say, a couple hundred years ago. Over the weekend, I was looking at some documents that some old census from the 1800s and 1700s, to where like it was very common that families had 12, 10, 15 kids. And I have 6, and I'm overwhelmed at times. Because, 6 is a lot for today's age. I think the average family is like 2.5 kids.
I have 2, and I'm overwhelmed.
Right? I cannot imagine having, 10 kids. Like, my dinner table would have to be twice the size that it is now. And then back then, life was just completely different, right? They had to prepare, think more long-term. I grew up in Iowa, Midwest, so winters were brutal. And just thinking about the way that they had to do things then, just to survive. Mm-hmm. Kids helped out on the farm. They grew up fast, in a sense. But I'm really interested in this topic and thinking about anxiety and depression. I'm not... this could be a controversial topic. This could be sensitive. So before we start, I just want to let everybody know we're very sensitive to that. We understand that every family is different and everybody's situation is different. So just open your heart, open your mind to, the heart of what we're saying and the heart of what we're going to talk about. But just to be honest with you, Cindy, when I was growing up, I never heard the words anxiety. I never heard the words depression. And now it just seems that that's all I hear. And especially when it comes to parenting, and when I confront my kids and I talk to them and I see it, or even just in having conversation with them about their day, the word depression, the word anxiety comes up a lot. And it's disturbing, to be honest with you. And in some cases, I've just told my kids, well, you guys call it anxiety. I called it being nervous. The true story, I was in 6th grade and I wanted to run for student council. And this might be the only time I actually may have experienced anxiety, but I just thought I was just being nervous. And I wanted to run for student council, but the only way to do that is I had to give a speech in front of the whole school.
Right.
6th grade, I dominated the tetherball courts, so people knew who I was. Like only one person could beat me every once in a while. But I was not by any means like this outgoing person. And I remember, just like it was yesterday, going up onto that stage and having the spotlight on my face, but yet being able to see like what seemed a sea of people, a sea of kids. It never ended. And they all were looking at me. And it was almost as if that attention I freaked out. I couldn't speak. Tears came down my face, and I turned and I looked at the teacher and said, I can't do this. And so perhaps that was the feeling, might have been the only anxious moment that I had. But I know that kids today certainly do go through anxiety. I mean, I know my daughter, like she described what she was feeling and what that looked like. And as she did, I was like, yeah, this is something I'd never dealt with before. So I'm hoping that today we can begin to have a better understanding of what anxiety, depression is, and then as parents, what can we do to help these kids? So I know that I titled this day or this broadcast, Parenting Accurately in an Age of Anxiety and Depression. But let's start there. Would you say that is that a true statement? That we live in an age of anxiety and depression? And it's okay if it's a wrong statement.
Well, I mean, I think it's a great title because this is a heavy topic, and just as you said at the beginning of the show, there's so many people on a spectrum. So I want to make sure that when we communicate, there can be lots of different variables. So I want to kind of speak to that a little bit also. I think it's important to recognize that the word anxiety, feeling anxious, nervous is an emotion, right? It's an emotion which can become a diagnosable condition. And so you want to be able to discern the difference between those. Like when we talk about people having obsessive compulsive disorder or being a little OCD, we use that word flippantly around, oh, I'm a little OCD today. And it just means you want to reorder things or stay on top of things or being very particular about something. It doesn't mean you actually have the diagnosis, for example. But OCD is essentially extreme anxiety, and the need to control is what we tend to do when we feel anxious, because when we feel anxious, we feel out of control. And so it's a spectrum, if you will. You can be a little nervous. Stage fright is the number 2 highest fear next to death itself. Yeah. So it's very common for people to have stage fright or whatever. We tap into this place inside of us, our thought life, our emotions about how we feel about ourselves or the circumstance of the situation. So I think it can start with an emotion, but the problem is when it becomes something that is so debilitating that you're no longer able to actually function and do life. Like you might have had a moment, there on the stage, but it didn't alter the course of your entire life, or you're anxious every day, where it's hard to function. That's when we know anxiety has taken over. And so I want to clarify that, because sometimes we use these words because we've been well educated in the last decade or so. There's been a big push for people to be able to understand mental health and to get rid of the stigma. And I'm all about that as a mental health practitioner. I think it's absolutely normal for everybody to go to therapy or to have a coach and to do personal growth and healing. But we want to differentiate the difference. And so I do think when you talk about being in an age of anxiety and depression, I think it's partly because we've done well on one hand to educate people about mental health issues, that it's real, that mental illness is real, but there are lots of different ways to treat it. There's lots of different reasons why there's mental illness. It can be situational, circumstantial, and it can also be chemical, a chemical imbalance, for example. I was sharing that I have a client right now who has brain trauma. She was in an accident and had literal physical damage to her brain, and has had a long road of recovery. And every now and then she'll have waves, a chemical reaction will happen, and she'll have waves of depression hit her. And I also say this too, anxiety and depression are almost like fraternal twins. Okay. Every now and then they come in hand. Some people will strongly feel like anxiety is what they struggle with. Some will feel like depression is what they struggle with, but it's often like a fraternal twin. That's why when people take particular medications like psychotropic meds, it's the same chemicals in your brain that it's trying to address. So, just to mention that. So there's a spectrum. Not everybody that feels anxious needs to have the label of an anxiety disorder or needs to even have medication. It could just be the emotion or a circumstance or a situation that's taking place. But because we're so used to using the words, it's become almost, if I dare say, popular to gravitate toward a diagnosis, to be able to either give an excuse or a reason for our behaviors. So we want to really parcel through the difference. When I see clients, I usually tell them, let's talk about your symptoms, what's not going well, and then let's see where do we want to get to, right? And then as I'm walking through that assessment, what I'm trying to determine is the exact thing I'm talking to you about. How bad is it? Is it disrupting their life all the time? Is it around specific situations or people? There's a wide variety of things that can cause anxiety or depression, and it may just be temporary. It may not be an actual illness that you have. It may not be chemical. It may not need medication. And it is certainly, no matter what, even if you have the diagnosis, it is not your identity. And I think that's the difference when we're talking about identifying the issue and then coming up with treatment planning.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think from just talking and communicating with my daughter about school and the things that happen on a lot of campuses, is that it seems like today a lot of kids are self-diagnosing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Depression is like the biggest one. Oh, I have depression. And I understand not in all cases, but it just seems like it can be like an excuse. Like they almost want to be diagnosed with depression or anxiety to validate or justify their behavior.
I think that does happen on occasion, not in every circumstance or situation, but we want a reason for why we have this issue or whatever it is. And I think that's where we have to be really careful about labels, and I am a clinician, so I know we have to diagnose and treat, but at the same time, this is why I take so much time talking about, it's not your identity. It doesn't have to be your identity. And I know that can be a little controversial for some people because they do sometimes take that on as a label. And then it becomes a limiting feature for your life, almost like, oh, well, I have this limitation or this handicap, so I'm not capable of doing X, Y, Z, or and we want to be able to help people find that balance of, yes, let's identify the problem. Let's own the situation. We want to own the feelings about it. But at the same time, why limit yourself if you are able to move beyond it, And so it's tricky because every person is in a different situation, right? And so it really is kind of a case-by-case thing.
Yeah. I read somewhere I read a report that said in 2011, there was the largest transfer or largest influx of teenagers that began to get cell phones. Mm-hmm. And that kind of correlated with depression, with a lot of like anxiety and the different things. And the cell phone certainly can be an entry point of many different things. And I think a lot of times maybe kids can get access to the media and to YouTube and all these other things rather young. And maybe they're not emotionally capable of handling like an online relationship. Now it's common that teens will build relationships through a phone rather than on the soccer field or on the baseball field or in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And so there's a different level of maturity and there's a different angle that people have to understand as they do that. But it was one of the one thing in the report that I thought was interesting. It said that the more time you spend on your phone, the less happy you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this looks different for every family, you can be depressed. You can have a day or two or three or whatever the time is that maybe you do feel down, but it doesn't necessarily that you have clinical depression.
Right.
Or, and like you said something earlier that I think was important, is that you can have a moment of, like I had a moment of anxiety. I felt really nervous on stage, but it didn't change my life. My life went back to normal. In fact, I actually won. I don't know how, but I think the kids felt sorry for me. But I ended up winning. And so what
well, if I can jump in here,
yeah.
I just wanted to speak on, when you're talking about the cell phones and social media, we are living in a different day and age, and we can certainly connect with people through electronics and things like that, but there's also a bit of a disconnect. And the disconnect I would highlight is very interesting when it comes to brain science. Our prefrontal orbital cortex, which is right here, this part of the front part of your brain behind your forehead, that's what we call our joy center. And we actually need to be around other people where we're making eye contact with those people. I think it can, on some level, still happen on the screen, but it is different. I mean, it is different when you're in the presence of somebody else. There's a bigger connection, and I think there is a true, even spiritual exchange that can take place that's different than online. So I think one of those is because our brain registers joy when I'm with somebody who likes to be with me and I don't have to earn it. There is something that registers in that connection with another human being face to face it is biological. We know that to be true. That's according to brain science. Yeah. The other thing is cyberbullying. When you think of social media and how many likes you have or you don't, or how many followers you have, and it becomes like this social popularity kind of thing, right? And I think that's part of the issue too in this day and age is people feel disconnected, and then there's these external rewards or consequences, if you will, when it comes to being online and stuff as well. So I think that can attribute to it, but I think loneliness is the key. If you're not really connected to people and have fellowship with people and feel belonging, loneliness is what's driving, I think, a lot of anxiety and depression, especially in our kids.
Yeah. And with the likes or the dislikes, I mean, if you post something and you don't get the response that you kind of secretly hoped in your heart, I think that many of us can feel, I mean, even us as parents, but especially kids can feel like, wow, I'm inadequate,
Mm-hmm.
And then that erodes away at their heart, erodes away at their self-confidence. And so,
yeah, whether they're online or not. I mean, back in the day, there were no phones when I was a teenager, and so they're the same issues that we're dealing with. It's just in a different worldview, if you will, a different model. I mean, we all struggled with identity in middle school and high school. I mean, you couldn't pay an adult to go back there, right? I mean, we all struggled with acceptance and feeling belonging and having worth and value. That's kind of the nature of humanity. We were made for connection. We were made for belonging. We were made for joy. And so in any time that's not being met in us, if we lack relational connection, this is where parents can really pay attention to their kids, not just in their peer groups that the kids are having, whether certainly to make sure they have some level of friends. Some kids are more introverted than extroverted, so they may not have 50 friends, but do they have any friends? Do they hang out with anybody? Do they spend time with people? Being able to pay attention that they do have some kind of peer influence. I work a lot with stay-at-home moms and stay-at-home kids or homeschooled kids or whatever, and how important it is to get them socially connected with their peers, having outside sports or art classes or whatever to supplement, or the homeschool associations, will get together at times, because peer connection is really important when we talk about anxiety and depression or any mood disorder or mood issue. Two things we tend to ask: how are they eating? How are they sleeping? Those are the common. Are they overeating, undereating? Are they oversleeping, undersleeping? And then how's their social life? Do they have a social life?
Yeah.
And so these are other kind of things that we can look at when we can see if our kids are struggling in anxiety or depression. But even if they have friends, anxiety and depression often comes out of those relationships not going well, which happens in every relationship. Every relationship is going to have conflict, but not every kid knows how to handle it. And so internalizing it, sometimes can create that anxiety or depression as well.
Yeah. So let's talk. I would like to talk about certainly what can we do as parents to help our children navigate those situations or navigate anxiety or navigate depression. But to start with, though, let's talk a little bit more about what are some of the signs of anxiety and depression. When we look at our kids, what's the difference between just a attitude, bad day versus real, like a bigger issue?
Well, I would talk about consistency, like how often and how long is the issue taking place, right? So when it comes to clinically actually diagnosing, every diagnosis in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is what we use to describe abnormal psychological behaviors, in order to have an actual diagnosis, you have to have some period of time where there's a consistency in a certain list of symptoms. Okay. So whether it's a week or 2 weeks versus a month or more, usually there has to be a cluster of symptoms in order to have a diagnosis. And when it comes to anxiety, there's all different kinds. It could be something as mild as what we would call an adjustment disorder, where they show signs of anxiety or depression or both, and or conduct as well, bad behavior, like you said, attitude. Well, it's if it can go away after a few months, right? If it's long and consistent for several months, that's the difference. How often is this happening? How deeply are they that way? How much are they isolating? When they're anxious, I have a kid who is somewhat anxious, and he will bite off his fingernails to the nub. It's a really bad habit behaviorally, but that's a sign or symptom when he's a little bit more anxious. He's chewing on a fingernail. It's just that pairing of a habit, right? So sometimes you pay attention to those kinds of things. If it's social anxiety, are they afraid to speak up? They could be introverted and that's their personality. They don't have to go on stage like you did necessarily in front of the public, but can they just socially interact? Is that a struggle? So you can have social anxiety. Every parent has gone through their kid having separation anxiety at some point, for the most part, when you drop them off at daycare or school or whatever, when they're really little and they cry and they don't want to part from you because they're attached to you, and they have to learn that it's okay for them to be apart. You're coming back, when you're little. And over time, kids get used to being dropped off at school and they're not crying. If they are, then there's, that's an abnormal sign for that. Some people have specific phobias or anxiety about things, snakes or spiders, for example, or things like that. I worked with a mom who actually had a great deal of postpartum depression and hormonal and chemical issues. And one of the things that would trigger her panic attack would be if her child spit up, because she would get so scared that there's something wrong with the baby that then from then on, even through her second and third child, developed a fear of vomit or people vomiting. It was a very specific, weird kind of trigger. That is an abnormal feature. That is not something you normally see on a regular basis, right? So I would talk about consistency of the symptoms. So anxiety can show up as physical, heart beating really super fast, not being able to speak, constantly. Maybe their hands are shaking or their palms are sweating or whatever. For some people, it's that fight or flight. Do I just stand still and I can't move and I can't talk, or do I run, from a situation and then start crying? Anxiety can just show up because I can't focus. I'm thinking of the worst scenario when people are anxious driving on the highway, for example, if they were in a car accident, and I had someone have some trauma from a car accident and she was afraid to get back behind the car in the road, or when people are afraid to fly. When we treat some of that, it's because of the way that this anxiety is inhibiting their life. That's when it's a big red flag. So how much are we seeing it? How often are we seeing it? Is it disrupting their ability to be in school? Is it disrupting their ability to sleep or eat? I mean, those are kind of the heavy symptoms. And that's true for depression as well. When they're sad and they're isolating, are they crying all the time? Again, are they oversleeping, undersleeping, overeating, undereating? Are they isolating? With depression, the thing that we get concerned about is when kids do self-harm, and they will not necessarily be suicidal, but they will have like what we call morbid thoughts. I just want to go to sleep and not wake up. I don't really want to do anything. Things that used to cause me pleasure, they're not fun anymore. I used to be really excited to go to play the piano, but I don't even want to try anymore. So things that used to make me happy don't make me happy anymore. Isolating, like I said. So any of those kinds of signs and symptoms, that's when we know, especially if it's constant every day for the week, every day for 2 weeks. Every now and then they might have a happy day, but it's more bad days than not, right? This is when we start to get concerned. If they're not able to function in school, if, any of those kinds of things that are going to be signs and symptoms. I don't want to go into like diagnosable kinds of conditions because I want to keep this very broad. But again, I talk about a spectrum, like it's a continuum, right? And so what would cause you some concern? That's usually a good enough reason. If you're paying attention and it causes you concern, let's take care of it quickly before it grows into something bigger.
Yeah. And I think that as a parent, we see our kid, maybe their grades suddenly drop or they go through some of the things that you mentioned. And we see, okay, this is not normal. This is not okay. I think it's really important what the parent does next. Mm-hmm. If the parent panics and says, oh no, you're dealing with anxiety or you have depression, and they kind of panic themselves and go into like that fight or flight mode with their kid, I have a feeling that that's probably not a very good way to respond. I think the kids need strength. They need the parents to show up, not necessarily with all the answers, but with all the love,
Yes. So learning how to take care of yourself. You just said it. If the parent starts having anxiety, or depression over, I'm a horrible mom, I can't take care of my kids. Like if you're struggling with anxiety or depression, notice that first, because that is often not blaming parents, but that is often a sign because we teach our kids how to cope. We teach our kids how to respond to things. And if we struggle with responding that way, wouldn't it be natural that our kids are going to struggle that way too? So we have to invest in our ability to get well. You're right, to be stronger, to take care of ourselves, to be more educated. So if I struggle with depression or anxiety, I'm going to make sure I get tools that I can take care of me so that I can actually teach that and have something to give to my kids. I can't give what I don't have for myself. So get help if it's professional help, if you need that. Get educated, read books, watch things like this, to be able to figure out, what are those kinds of signs? And humility to say, I think I struggle in that area too. Let me go and learn about this so I can get better, so that I can pass on health to my children. I think that's really important. So to start off with, self-care is the big thing. Your kids need parents to be wholehearted and healthy. They need the parent to be able to know how to take care of their own emotions and to be able to be problem solvers. And you're right, even if parents don't have the answer, the most important thing you got to say to your kid is, I'm here.
Yes.
I'm present with you.
Yeah.
I love you, and I'm going to do everything in my power to help you. And that's the thing. They need to know they're not alone.
And I think that we can underestimate the power of being there, the power of our presence. I think probably 80% of the problem would go away if a parent will take the time to be there. And, you don't have to, for me, like depression, anxiety, it was something I didn't know anything about. I knew what I went through as a kid, and I knew, the different moments that I felt down or I felt anxious. Mm-hmm. But to a level where, my daughter was cutting at one point. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know all the answers, so I did a little research. And, I remember specifically there was a time where, we met with the school counselor. And this guy gave her some coping skills on how to deal with anxiety. Because she was, every day she had an episode where she literally would go through an anxiety attack. And in that moment, I remember feeling somewhat inadequate because I'd never had an attack like that, and I didn't know. But so what I did is I took this paper that he gave her, and it gave her a list of coping skills. And I remember spending some time with her and going over them and then encouraging her and loving on her and walking through that with her. And I mean, I know that there's a place and for a good therapist like yourself, one of the best. I definitely, if you're here, you're watching and you feel like you need some extra help, I mean, I encourage you to get in touch with Cindy. And we're going to give you access to her website and some of her materials after the show or near the end of it. But I remember just sitting with her and doing that. And then she took those skills and she started applying them. And I would check on her often And within, believe it or not, within a week, all the episodes that she had started to get shorter.
Mm-hmm.
And then before you knew it, they weren't happening as often. And now I don't even know when the last time she had one.
Which is wonderful. That's wonderful to hear. But I think you nailed on something very specific.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. It's such a common thing for parents to blame themselves, to feel helpless. What did I do wrong? That's a natural response. I just want to validate that happens with parents. But you invested in taking time to understand, to check in with her, to communicate with her, her identity, that she was loved, that you were present, that you were there for her. So even if parents feel like, how could this have happened under my watch? How could this have happened under my nose? Well, number one, if they're a teenager, they don't want to tell you everything. That's natural for them not to. It's natural for them to want to kind of differentiate and become their own person, or not want to bother you, or because they want to please you, they put on a happy face and pretend like everything's okay when it's not, or they're ashamed, or they're afraid of how you're going to respond as a parent. They make up all this stuff in their head, like you'll be disappointed in me, or you'll be mad at me, or whatever. And so it is so important that when parents do find out, they are able to keep their own emotions in check, not get angry and lash out of fear, not because anger might show up, even though it's fear that's underneath, right?
Yeah.
Or to not blame the kid because they're defensive about feeling like a bad parent, but instead set all of your stuff aside and be there for the child, and try to find out, check in with them more often. And I think it was probably powerful also for you, Jason, as dad, especially with daughters. I do think there is some truth to, when we talk about the role of mothers and fathers, stereotypically, of course, mothers are the nurturer. They're the ones who will, try to educate and nurture and comfort and do those things, like when the kid's sick or whatever. Dads can do that too, don't get me wrong. But when we think of fathering, fathers provide, they protect, and they speak identity. And so as dad, I think you probably had the fastest connection with your daughter because you were able to speak identity into her by saying, you may be struggling with this, but this is not who you are. Yes. I know who you are, and I'm not going to let you carry a negative label that is not who you are. You might be struggling in this area. You might have difficulty in this, but we're going to overcome it. We're going to treat it. We're going to deal with it, and you're going to get on the other side of it. And so your ability to be able to attune with her emotions, validate where she's at. She must be struggling. We have to be careful as parents not to minimize. Right. That is a big one. Parents will sometimes go, oh, well, that's nothing. You didn't go through what I went through. I walked to school back and forth in the snow. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes
both ways.
Right, exactly. We'll come up with some kind of story where we can't really relate. And it's so important that you don't do that. You have to attune and validate their emotions. Try to get in their shoes. Remember what it was like for you as a teenager, but you aren't them and they aren't you, so your personalities and your temperaments can be so different that you don't get it because you maybe weren't an insecure person when your child is. Maybe you're an extroverted person and your child's an introverted person. You don't understand each other.
Right.
It's okay. Set it aside, attune with your kid, and just be able to speak like you said. I'm here. We're going to figure this out, and I'm here to help you. And you checking in with her every day might have been a little annoying on one hand for teenagers, be like, leave me alone. Why do you keep bringing it up? I was working with one teenager who was doing that with her dad, because in their situation, there was a strong emotional connection between the teenage girl and the mother, but not so much with the dad. They had a good relationship, but not as much. And interestingly enough, not that she planned it this way, but this actually brought them closer together because it brought an awareness of dad needing to spend more time having conversation with her. So she started off feeling a little annoyed. It's kind of weird. Why do you keep bringing this up? I'm kind of embarrassed by it. To then shifting, much like your daughter did, of thanks for checking in with me. No, I'm really good. Hey, let's do something fun. Let's spend some more quality time together where it's not always about the issue, but more about, again, emotional connection.
It's all about that connection. It's what I hear you saying is that parents can really help their children in cases like this. I mean, probably more than anyone else, really. It takes, I mean, imagine the connection, and it's all about connection. It's all about
Yeah.
that love connection between the parents and their kids. And, imagine, like, I'm sure it takes some time, for you in your profession to build a connection
Mm-hmm.
with that teen or with the preteen. And
Mm-hmm.
so, which you could do it, but it takes time and there's an investment. And the parent already has that. Even
Right.
if the relationship could use some work. When my daughter went through that, our relationship needed some work. I mean, to be very transparent. And I'd failed. I'd made some, I probably did not take seriously her cries for help. Because I'm looking back, she definitely, like, there was indications in her life that if I was more in tune with the way I am now, I would have picked up on it earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But, and sometimes, especially dads, we are more logical driven and we have to work hard to be nurturers.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I mean, just the other day, my daughter shared with me a bad dream. She was disturbed by it. And I was with her, and she actually asked me to come to her room. So she was telling me about it. And so I'm there, and I'm just like patting her on the leg. I'm like, yeah, well, good thing it was a dream. And she just asked me, like, can you hug me?
Mm-hmm.
Not in an attitude, but she's like, can you hug me? And I was like, oh, yeah, that's probably all you needed. And I'm here,
Yeah.
trying to like logically explain, well, it's a dream, like you don't have to worry about it. And all she wanted was a hug. And I think that there's power in the presence.
Right.
As a kid, I remember feeling safer when mom and dad was around. And
Yeah.
as a teenager, so for some reason, there's this thing that happens when kids grow up and they enter into like the preteen years and that teen years where I think as parents, it's easy to feel like our role is less valuable because
Mm-hmm.
they're growing up. They
Mm-hmm.
don't need mom and dad anymore.
You're more independent.
Yeah, they're more
Yeah.
independent. They even reject us. They suddenly know it all. But
Mm-hmm.
still, that role, that connection, will never die. It
Right.
does change as they get older and become adults and they move on, and that relationship does change, but there's still
Mm-hmm.
that connection there. And
Well, what I do is I tell adults, even right now, any adult that's listening, do you not have a little boy or little girl inside of you that still longs for love, that
yeah,
still longs to be known and to be seen and to be heard and to be connected? Where we tend to, show up is when we're looking at our marriages, maybe, or work life or whatever. But we always have that part of our heart that needs validation, love, and connection. That's just our human nature. So even though our teenagers can be, independent and have attitude or whatever at times and say that they can do things themselves. And yes, it's our job to work ourselves out of the job of them needing us so much. At the
yeah,
same time, that emotional need is always there. They may not always need us to do things for them or provide everything all the time, but that emotional connection is always there. I'm super proud of your daughter though for communicating what she
yeah,
needed. I often recommend Gary Chapman's Five Love Languages. That book, I think there's even one for teens about teenagers or something.
yeah,
But the five love languages, the concept is that we all receive love in different ways. There's a language of love that we speak that we want more than other things. And so for her, in that moment, she wanted physical touch and closeness.
yeah,
She just needed a hug from dad. The
yeah,
words of affirmation was not the language of love that met the need that she desired. So there's that. I'll just run through those real quick. There's
yeah,
words of affirmation, physical touch and closeness, quality time spent together, acts of service, and then gifts. So all
yeah,
of those are ways you can love somebody, but she needed comfort through physical touch, and she was
yeah,
able to recognize her need and ask for it. And I think that's important too.
yeah, definitely. And so to kind of recap, some of the signs of anxiety or depression is just like a real consistency. Um, that's like when it's serious and you need to like really dig into it and find out what's going on. Get help if needed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but like sudden drops, like sudden changes, constantly wanting to be alone. Some of the things we might think is common sense. We as parents we should
Yeah.
be able to know if our kids are off or not. Um,
Yeah.
But then,
Well, sometimes we will see a kid that's like, for example, an introverted kid that's not
mhm,
super social anyway, and or they're readers, they love to read books or whatever.
mhm,
We may not think they're isolating because we're like, well, that's just kind of how they are, But so you have to kind of pay attention toward each kid's personality, if you will.
right, that's true.
What's normal or abnormal for them. If they're usually very fun loving and they're out in the living room and the kitchen all the time with you as a family, and then all of a sudden they don't have anything to do with you, don't just chalk it up to, oh, that's them being a teenager.
Right.
Sometimes we can do that. Well, of course, teenagers don't really want us around anymore. I wouldn't buy into some of that thinking. Your kids still need you no matter
Yes.
what. They actually want the quality time and the attention. Sometimes kids will ask for negative attention because that's better than no attention at all. So sometimes we will deal with behavior issues, attitude, and we don't realize that no, they're really struggling. They're struggling, and you need to be able to do that heart check of how close am I? How connected am I? Do I really know what's going on in their thoughts? Kids who are anxious can also show up a little ADD, distracted.
Yeah.
So if they're not just because their grades are slipping because the course is hard, but they have a hard time concentrating. Sometimes that's not ADD, it's anxiety.
True.
So you have to differentiate between some of those things as well. So yeah, just in general, when you know your kid is off, they're not acting like normal, don't just chalk it up to being a teenager, or being moody. Really check in with them.
Yeah.
Being able to know what's going on in their life. Do you know who their friends are? Do you know the drama that's happening at school lately?
Right.
Do you know what's going on with their thoughts and how they struggle with self-esteem? How open are they with sharing you some of those things?
Yeah.
When you can stay invested in that emotional relationship, that's the power that you wield as a parent. We tend to focus more on behavior and on making sure they're fed and clothed into school and getting their grades up.
Hmm.
We can't only focus on the practical. We've got to look at that emotional relationship and just have fun,
Yeah.
having fun together, having good quality time, spending time, FaceTime together. That's really important when we talk about emotional intimacy, conversation, connection.
Yeah.
That's the key, I think, to it all.
Yeah. One thing that I think that helped me really dive into, and we mentioned it earlier, is I asked a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And I asked a lot of questions every day. And especially for the ones that are like readers or they're more introverted, you can really learn a lot by asking questions. However, one thing that I had to do that was a bit of a learning process for me, because I am a fixer, is that anytime we talked about anything, I asked questions that would start a conversation. I wanted to fix everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so just as a dad, I had to learn to just listen, just be present, listen. Just I don't have to fix everything. And if they ask for it, or sometimes I would ask them, can I help you with this? Can I fix this for you? I know what's going on. You've explained it. This is an easy one. And sometimes they would say, no, I just want to vent. And I
Yeah.
had to just listen. But I did find that asking questions every day, and often, really, really helped. It showed also that I was concerned. It showed them that I care about their life. I
Mm-hmm.
care about your grades too, when we'll talk about your grades, but what do you do at lunch? Who do you talk with, or and I've intentionally invited their friends over,
Yeah.
just to get to know them.
Yeah.
And the kids, their friends were shocked when I'd sit them down at the table and start asking them questions about their family, about them. I even just had fun with it too and asked them about their grades. And I kind of assumed like a father role for, a short time.
Yeah.
But I mean, truthfully, many of these kids have never been asked.
Yeah.
So if you're a parent out here, I mean, and you've got this down and you feel like you're doing well, like share it, like get the
Yeah.
other kids around you. I mean, kids need accountability. They need to know they're loved. They need to know that there's others out there that can help them. And if
There's so much power that a parent can have, not only just in their kids, but in their children's
yeah,
friends. In fact, we would often say, like, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. In youth ministry, when I was doing
yeah,
that for a season, and their peer groups are so important. So if you can build connection with their friends, it is one way in to help build trust and understanding of what's going on in your child's world. But yeah, being an influence over another kid too, and just being able to say something to them that we don't know what their parents' life or their home life is like or
Right.
whatever, and for them to be able to hear it from someone other than their parent is powerful.
Right.
There's a great deal of influence that we can have in being encouragers with them, and I think we all know stories and probably all know someone when we were growing up that was an influential figure that was not our parent, a
Yeah.
teacher or youth pastor or coach or somebody else. You do have influence as a mom and a dad, not just in your own kids. And so I do think that that is one way to do that. Asking questions is fabulous, especially open-ended questions.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to get it was fine, no, yes. Quit asking me all the questions. It's like
Right.
pulling teeth with some of the kids. They don't always do that. But
Mhm.
then, okay, well, listen, this is my job. It's my job to know what's going on in your life. My job is never over. So,
Yeah.
this is me trying to be a part of your life. If you get resistance, it's important for you to just kind of let them know that I love you. I want to know what's going on with you.
Yeah.
I don't have to know every little detail of your life. I want to respect privacy to some degree, but share with me what's going on with you, and vice
Right.
versa.
Yeah.
So
And it's
maintaining that
rewarding.
relationship is key.
It's so rewarding when you're constantly asking questions, but then like suddenly you get the question, "How was your day?" I
Mm-hmm.
remember hearing that once, and I was like, it was like a scratch record like moment. I was like, "What? Like you want to know
Yeah.
about my day? Oh, well, let's pull up a chair." But I was remembering as you were sharing that my 7-year-old, I'm sorry, my 8-year-old doesn't really like me asking about his day at school. He wants
Mm-hmm.
to talk about he's really into hunting and he wants to talk about outside of school activities. He doesn't want to talk about school. But one thing that I found that helped him open up more about it was that I would talk to the teacher and I would find out what's going on. So then I'd speak to him in a way like I already know.
Mm-hmm.
What about this? And I would ask him about a certain situation or about a test or something that I had a little bit of insight on, and it helped him discover that he's not informing me necessarily what's going on. It's like I'm entering into a discussion with him about what's happening, and
Mm-hmm.
so then he knew he couldn't just. It was fine, wouldn't work anymore.
Yeah, no, and this is you knowing your kid.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a boy who's that way too. He's like, "Mom, you're asking me 20 questions." I was like, "Honey, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on with you, make sure everything's all good or whatever." But he doesn't, school's not his thing either. He'd rather talk about something more fun and more engaging. You get him talking about a subject that they want to talk about and
Oh
they
yeah,
open up and share that, run with it. Run with that.
for
Whatever
sure.
they want to talk about, let them talk about whatever they want to talk about. But of
Yeah,
course, yeah, when it comes to school, you gotta be the parent and
got it
figure out what
right.
is going on. So I do think the more involved you are in school, get on all of the reminds or all the apps that
Mm-hmm.
they use nowadays, to keep up
It's
with all
crazy.
the homework and all the newsletters from all the teachers or whatever. Staying involved in that way is super important in
Yeah,
communicating with all the people that influence your kid.
definitely. So at one point, um, and you hit on this a little bit earlier, but at one point, just kind of in closing and wrapping this up,
Mhm.
you know, there's like the mild symptoms of anxiety and depression where, it's temporary and they may go through something and we can show up and be there for them. But for cases that are more extreme to where, you know, you're showing up and it's not working, or maybe you get you make some progress, but then it goes back down. At one point, should a parent really reach out to somebody else and say, okay, like, I need some more help?
I would always err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
So I know I'm biased. I'm a therapist, but I would be the same way. If I
Yeah.
really felt like my kids were struggling and I wasn't seeing improvement, I wasn't seeing a turnaround. And I'm not talking about just one day of happiness. I'm talking like, okay, we got over that hump. I'm not going to let them suffer for a really long time without getting help. And if it's beyond what I can do as a parent, there's wisdom in seeking outside help. So
Yeah.
whether it is through the teachers because it's about schoolwork, or maybe they're struggling learning a subject like math or something, or I had one season when my son was really young, had a teacher shame him in front of the class. And when he finally opened up to me about it, I had to have a conversation with the teacher. Now,
Yes.
she never in a million years would have thought that that's what happened. She didn't see it from that point of view. She
Hmm.
didn't realize it. But the beauty of my conversation with her, she was able to apologize to him, and that helped bridge their relationship there too. So The minute you see them, say something like, well, I never want to talk to that person. I don't want to go to school anymore. When it gets to the point where their life is like not working, if everything that you're trying is not getting an improvement, reach out for help, whether it's a school counselor, whether it's a professional counselor. I encourage parents all the time, no matter what age your kid is, when you send a kid to a therapist or a counselor, it is okay to ask questions in terms of, hey, can I get a report? Can I get some feedback on what's going on? A lot of times I'll have parents just kind of drop off their kid and be like, here you go, fix them, and then send them home.
Right.
And sometimes I'm like, no. I'm a family therapist. So I really want the parents' feedback in the first session, especially what are you seeing? What's going on? Or the first 5 minutes of a session. Are we seeing any improvements? And then even when I see teenagers that drive themselves, every now and then I'll say, okay, listen, you have absolute confidentiality in here, but it is vitally important that we report back to mom and dad who are trusting you with me, so we need to give them a report. So we'll invite the parent back into the session, even if it's for a few minutes and not necessarily the whole session, just to say, okay, and then I don't do all the talking. I let the teenager do all the talking. Here's what we've been working on. Here's where I feel like it's been going better. And I want to check in with the parent to make sure that it is. So I really encourage parents to be involved in their kids if they take them to therapy or counseling.
Right.
You don't need to know everything that they're talking about because they do need some confidentiality, but check in with a therapist, check in with your kids, see if you can get in on one of those reporting sessions just to kind of give you an update, because you want to make sure that your investment is working. And hopefully you do see some signs at home, of it helping. But you still want to be involved in some way. You may not need to know every detail that they're talking about, but it is important to still stay engaged in that way. So I do think I don't think that there's a time limit, right? Like, I don't think there's, okay, after it's been 2 weeks, then you need to send them to a therapist. I mean, I think the sooner is better than later. I think you can always err on the side of caution. And you can
especially if they're like
teenager.
cutting. Yeah. But if a child's started with depression, feel episodes of anxiety, and then you start seeing them cover their arms, and they're cutting or they're doing something, more drastic than that, then it's time to move.
Or, and with cutters, I'll mention, I'll just go here for a minute. They're covering their arms. They're wearing long sleeves in the middle of the summer. Now, I know hoodies are like the fashion statement right now, but being able to see their arms, being able to identify, why are they hiding themselves or covering themselves too much, those kinds of things. The other thing about cutting, I want to kind of explain this to parents, because sometimes parents don't have any frame of reference. They just think immediately it's suicidal. Not always. I will tell you that when I get a kid that's cutting, I always ask them if I can see where they cut. It matters where, because it tells me, are they trying to hide it? Are they cutting on their thighs, their inner arm that can be hidden with their clothing? If primarily it's on the forearms, where kids tend to cut, they usually cut across, and it's usually surface level. Sometimes we'll draw blood. The deeper, the worse it is. I'll ask them questions like, did you feel it while you were cutting, or were you numb? How did you feel when you saw the blood? I mean, all of these are kinds of questions I'm asking to know, like, what's going on with them? What made them do that? What were they thinking? What did they use? They could use a stapler. They don't have to use a razor. They could use just some, random sharp thing. It doesn't necessarily mean they're suicidal, but if they say language like that, I just want to die, I don't love myself, I hate my life. Those are drastic statements that sometimes we think, oh, teenagers being dramatic. But these are very serious statements. You have to take them seriously. And the sooner you get them help, the better. Because here's the deal. I would rather have a dramatic moment that might be a little moodiness, and them come to therapy, all of a sudden they realize, oh, like, this isn't just something I can flippantly say. Like, I'm going to be taken somewhere to be seen, because this is not okay. You know what I'm saying? So it's an immediate flag for them to kind of know, oh, and now they may try to downplay it, or they may open up, and it might be a wonderful opportunity to figure out what's going on with them. But that's something, if they're cutting on their legs or their stomach or other places, that's usually a sign of low self-image, body image, or they're just
Yeah.
trying to hide it again, a sense of control. So any of those things, if any of that's happening, I would always err on the side of caution, take them to a therapist, even if they only have 3, 4, 5 sessions.
Right.
At least you did due diligence to do something. Now, if they have an active plan, if they threaten to take their life, if they say that they're suicidal, if they start talking about taking pills or trying to take pills or whatever their method would be, that's a more dangerous sign, and you need to respond to that. And I have had cases and stories of people who have not paid attention to those signs, thinking it was just attention seeking, and the most horrible situations take place.
Yeah.
So you never want to minimize outcry. If they're crying for help, that means they need help.
Yes.
If you think it's just attention seeking, well, it's attention seeking. That means they want some attention. Let's give them the right kind of attention.
Exactly.
Don't ignore it and don't minimize it ever. We've had, sadly, suicides way more often than they should happen, especially with teenagers. And they don't sometimes realize what's happening. I do know there are cases where people didn't even mean to necessarily do it. It was an outcry, but it happened. And so I think majority of the time they're asking for help. They don't really want to do it, but they're asking for help and they don't know what else to do. So you have to take it serious.
For sure. And so if you're listening and maybe you have a child that is in a more severe situation, like certainly reach out. Cindy, I know you're available. And before we end today, could you just take a moment and share with our viewers how they can get in touch with you if they want to go deeper with you?
Sure. My website is cindyhatcher.com, CINDYHATCHER. Just cindyhatcher.com is the website. And on that website is a contact page. So you can send me an email or a message. Our office number is on there as well. And we'll do whatever we can to kind of give you the resources that you need.
Awesome. And, we'll put that in the comments as well. That way, it'll be an easy way to get in touch with you. But thank you again. I know that we're getting into like another subject that's really dear to my heart, so it's hard to stop right now. The suicide prevention, I think that, part of the goal of this broadcast and the goal that I have is to prevent suicides. I read in a report a couple weeks ago that in some states, as high as 20% of high school students have thought about suicide.
Yeah.
And then like 7% have actually created a plan. And so I believe that through building parents, and this is the purpose here, through building parents and giving them the tools and the things they need to connect with their kids, the stronger connection, things happen and every situation's different, but the chances of a child actually going through with something drastic like that, I believe can, a strong relationship will help negate that. So that's what we're doing. That's the purpose. That's what we want to continue striving for. So thank you again for joining us. I really appreciate your time, and it's always a good conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an important conversation.
It is. We look forward to having you again in the future.
All right.
Thank you. All right, guys. Wow. I hated to end that. So good. If you guys were just joining us, and I encourage you to go back and watch the replay, watch it all, because it's very dynamic and can really help us understand our kids more and how to help our kids through difficult times. If you're new to us, I just want to remind everybody, I do have some materials for you on the website, parentinghackreally.com. I have a free 7-day guide on how to grow your connection with your teen. On there, just go to the website. You guys can just put in your name and email, then you'll have access to that free resource right away. So again, thank you guys. I do want to also mention that next week we're going to be having Donna Tidich. I don't know if I pronounced that last name right. Donna Tidich on. She is a family connection expert. We're going to be talking about family meetings, the value of the family meetings, what does a family meeting even look like? So you're not going to want to miss this. It's going to be dynamic. She has 8 kids, 8 biological kids. She's homeschooled them all, and she's an entrepreneur. Has her own business, and so there's that session next week. Is going to be dynamic. Family meetings, I don't remember ever having one when I was a kid. So I know we've implemented that now, and we're going to dive into all of the things about family meetings. So you want to join us, mark that down, go to the events, mark that you're going or at least interested. If you can make it, join us live, guys. There's nothing like the live events. I understand everybody's schedule, and sometimes you have to catch the replay, but if you can join us live, the better. And drop some questions. Feel free. I mean, I'm willing to take this a little bit interactive. I mean, we have an agenda and there's a purpose in the meeting, but I'm definitely willing to serve you guys. So if you write a question down, put it in the comments, put it in the event discussion, and near the end of the show, I want to get to them. And if it's done early enough, maybe I'll even frame the show around your questions. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope that you have a great week the rest of this week, and I look forward to seeing you guys very, very soon. Thank you.